Good afternoon, Los Angeles. That's what I like to hear. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Shonda Goward. I happen to be a California native from up top in the Bay Area. And I really am thankful to be having this conversation with you all here in my home state. So thank you for having me. Oops. This talk is an ode to my mama's resilience. Sometimes mom or mother, but mostly I prefer mama, colloquial. Recently, my mama shared with me the story of the birth of her first child. Here she was, sitting on the hill, pregnant, and contemplating the life-altering decision to become a single parent in the 1970s. Partially influenced by her Church of God in Christ upbringing, hallelujah, and partially because my mama is not one to back down from a challenge, she had that big-headed baby, which was me. But we struggled financially and needed help from our extended family. While my mother finished her military service, my grandparents helped raise me. This is my ancestral home, 3154 Kelly Street, and there were 7 of us in here in a 4-bedroom house. My grandparents, my mama, my brother, and 3 of my uncles. Reaganomics never quite trickled down on us. And as my mother transitioned out of the military and into the private sector, we couldn't afford California anymore. And this is before the tech boom. So we became a part of the migration north to Washington State, where first we lived with family, then friends, then in public housing. I went to high school with gangsters and dope boys. Our graduation rate was somewhere between 30 and 35%. I began working under the table at a racetrack at age 12. And officially at age 14. So clearly, getting into college was a very big deal. When I arrived, like many first-generation college students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I nearly drowned. I was an out-of-state student and didn't understand what that meant. Only 18% of our student body can be from out of state. Instead, I felt inferior because of my low-income status, and my grades suffered because I was working far too many hours. And back then, in the 1990s, there were no programs for first-generation or low-income students at most schools. We were supposed to be grateful that we had been admitted at all, especially to a big-time fancy program. Upon graduation, I accepted a position at ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, earning a whopping $12 an hour, which was considered grand when you think about the fact that the federal minimum wage at the time was $4.75 per hour. Incidentally, it has only gone up $3 in the 20 years since I graduated from college. So here I was with my fancy degree from a fancy school at a top network, and what was I? Still poor. And that's when I realized that first-generation student status was not enough. Unfortunately, on our campuses, we don't talk much about class. We talk about first-gen students and urban students and rural students, and often these are euphemisms for the working class. The prettying up of the language around low-income students allows us to ignore the reality of their lives. Like Ms. Jacobs mentioned, I have the distinct privilege of working on a program that provides a debt-free education to 4,000 low-income students on my campus. It's wonderful. We provide tuition, fees, room, board, and sometimes mental health services. And yet, many of my students are still working too many hours to save up for those unpaid internships or to send money home to their families. First-generation status encapsulates a lack of understanding about how our systems work on campus. Low-income status, on the other hand, goes well beyond our campus boundaries. Data supports the decoupling of first-generation and low-income student status. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, 27.4% of first-generation college students graduate in 4 years, and about half in 6 years, which is kind of shocking, right? However, only 14.5% of students from the lowest socioeconomic quartile graduate in 8 years. So think about it. NBA standouts, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, if their children decide to go to college, will be first-generation college students. Their situations are going to be very different than your low-income students, and we should be talking about that. So what is it like for my students on campus? Like I mentioned, they're working too many hours, and it's not even on campus. I have students who go home on the weekend to be pharmacy techs, they're McDonald's managers because it pays more than work study. These students are missing out on key opportunities to connect with their collegiate peers, and perhaps more importantly, with their faculty who can link them to research experiences, and their staff who can link them to professional opportunities. So I'm sure you want to know, what do we do? Well, first, being vulnerable is a start. Because I've shared my story with my students, they are more apt to listen when I tell them to come on and get it together. So we have to talk to other people who grew up working class and encourage them to share their stories. We also need to listen to our faculty who study working class life. Universities are not very good at applying what we know to what we do every day. Hiding behind euphemisms for working class status, I don't think empowers our students. Rather, instead of preventing stigma, I think it reinforces it. We should be telling students that the skills and determination and resilience they've already learned to get into school will support them in the future. Helping the working class identify with being working class is not just a matter of semantics or graduation rates, it's also about politics. So researchers have found that the higher your socioeconomic status, the more likely you are to participate in the political process. Those same researchers found that there are very few organizations that lobby for the working class. So the voices of our poor people are not being heard in politics. The working class has a great deal to benefit from organizing and working together collaboratively to move forward their agenda, particularly across racial lines. And we can help build that bridge and make that connection. Next, we need to talk about class in our discussions of diversity and inclusion. Some time ago at a previous institution, I was sitting on a panel with my dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, a pretty straight-laced guy, not really controversial, and a student asked him, "What does diversity mean to you?" And he said, "How do we go from Black power to diversity and inclusion?" Now I turned and said, "Oh, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting that from the dean." And what I think he meant was, how do we go from demanding our rights and to be seen and to be heard to just asking to be included? Diversity isn't just about difference. Diversity is about groups of people who have been historically oppressed, and the poor are one of those groups. Incidentally, I want to take a moment to talk about when we use the term diverse students, right? I am a Black woman who grew up working class, but individually I am not diverse. Institutions are diverse or not, and better yet, equitable or not. But people can't be diverse. So I just want to be mindful of our language around that. We should also be talking about how class intersects with other oppressed identities. Last year, Raj Chetty and some other researchers published a paper for the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they found that no matter what class level a Black boy is born into, he is likely to end up lower middle to working class. So a Black male student who's born upper income is still likely to end up lower middle to working class. Had they not looked at the data across race, class, and gender, they would not have found this gap. On my own campus, we are doing a fantastic job of educating and graduating our low-income students. Our overall graduation rate is 90% in 6 years, and my students in my program are at 86%. Until I dug into the data and found that low-income Black males are graduating at 16 percentage points behind the university average. Doing that research allowed me to write a grant, create a program, and begin to rectify that problem. Had I not looked at my data intersectionally, again, I would not have found the problem. Finally, I ask you to take a look at your own policies and procedures and examine where process is superseding the needs of students. When I was first earning my first graduate degree, my university did not disperse financial refunds until after the add drop period was over, which meant that I didn't have any money for the first month and a half of school, and I was starving. We, as career administrators, have the ability to ask why we are doing things the way we do them and to alter our processes when we see fit. Rather than relying on our students to lead a protest and force us to change our systems, why don't we all start working on doing it now, right? I rarely talk anymore about being a first-generation college student because it doesn't impact me now. I do talk often about growing up low income and the long-term impact it had on me, and the lessons of resilience and sheer will to succeed that I learned from my mama. And look at me now. Thank you very much.